Greetings, folkaroos. It's Haley, and finally, welcome back to another video. Now, you may be asking why I haven't uploaded this in the normal time frame, and that is because, unfortunately, immediately after attending this chess meetup, I felt pretty dang sick. I got a terrible stomach bug, and it kind of knocked me out of commission for 3 or 4 days, and I wasn't able to make this video. Yeah, to put it simply, yeah. But anyway, with that being said, like, let's make it a video now. There's no time like the present. Anyways, let's hop into it. So when I came into this chess meetup, I was the first one there. I showed up a little bit early, and the only person there was the leader of the group, the owner of it, Chuck. So I played a couple games against him, and this game was not my most proud achievement, gotta say. Yeah, e4, e5. I decided to get a little adventurous and not play my trusty Carl Khan, and I venture headfirst into the King's Gambit, which I should have immediately known was coming from Chuck because this is the kind of stuff that he plays. He likes to play these aggressive gambits. I don't know why I didn't just stick to my guns. Now I'm the King's Gambit is like a super tactically rich opening. I'm already out of my comfort zone. Like I've barely ever studied this. Anyway, I take a knight f3, and what I do know, yeah, because if white plays d4 in this position, the danger is that you don't want to allow the queen to come here with check. Like, that's the danger of the King's Gambit, because you open up this diagonal by pushing the f pawn early. So knight f3 is a necessary move before you can take the center, which is why the best move for black in this position, theoretically, and I did know this going in, was pawn to g5. Just immediately going after this knight, because normally it's not really advisable to push pawns like this on your king side, but since white has already done the same thing, it's you're trading imbalance for imbalance, and once you kick this knight out of the center, you're just going to develop and have a very nice position. So yeah, g5 threatens to go g4, and there's a couple ways white could respond to this. They could play h3 to try to kick it back. They could play h4, trying to challenge my pawn. They could just develop and let me go here. He goes h4, forcing a decision out of me, because I can't play this, because then he could just take, and my rook would be hanging on the back rank. That's not a good way to lose a rook. So yeah, g4, this is the mainline move. He puts his knight on e5, and rather than just aimlessly attacking it and losing my pawn for no compensation, hold on, I gotta go plug it. Computer. All right, there we go. We are charging up. And yeah, so instead of just like playing d6 and allowing knight takes g4 with very little compensation, I decided to play knight f6 and say, like, if you take on g4, I'm just going to take you, right? We're going to get a trade of pawns. Bishop to c4. Now, this move has a very clear intention. The idea is to go for the f7 pawn, and black actually has very few ways to defend it. And this is the first audience moment of the game. And the hint I'm going to give you is, what is one of the only ways that, or actually the only way that black can block this threat on f7? And if you were able to figure it out, the move is pawn to d5, right? Because if bishop takes d5, then you take on d5, right? You remove the threat, and then you take with the queen, you're hitting g2, you're hitting the knight, and black is better. But if pawn takes, the pawn gets in the way of the bishop's path, and you can then play knight bishop to d6 and kick the knight back out, and black once again has a better position. So he played pawn takes, but this is where my knowledge ended. That part that I just said about bishop d6, I didn't know at the time, and I recaptured. Because, my knight is still in the way. So I thought that I was doing good here. Um, I thought he was just going to take on g4 and we were going to have an even game. But the best move for him here is just knight c3, just putting more pressure on that knight. And if I defend it with something like c6, then he's just gonna play d4 and lock his knight in, and he's just gonna have a great position. Queen e2 can even set up like discovery threats against my king. These pawns, like my king is gonna prove to be much more unsafe than his king. Landscaper guys are outside. I wanted to close the window. All right. Yeah. So he plays d3, which is doesn't really do much to pile more pressure onto this knight. So I played bishop to e7. I want to attack this pawn and take it with check, right? That's the idea. But the proper move here was bishop to g7, just getting tempo on this. So white does not have time to play knight to c3. I did not see that. So bishop to e7, and he inexplicably takes on g4 at this exact moment. And, you know, me being a normal person and all, I do what this move was intended to accomplish and take on h4, which the computer doesn't even like. The computer wanted me to just go bishop to e6. Why? Not exactly clear. Probably to do something like this and maybe take and trade the queens or something. Like, I don't know. But yeah, bishop takes h4. I'm just like, I'm winning a pawn. This must be good. King f1. And the point here is that his king is actually safe on f1. Like, I don't have any easy ways of getting to him. He's defending this square very well at this moment, so there's no threat of like any knight checks over there. And my king is actually going to be much more unsafe than his, because he's going to play queen e2. He has knight f6 in the future. Maybe bishop takes knight, right? I take on g4, which is not a good decision at all, because now I invite a tempo onto my own bishop and activate one of his pieces towards my king. Bishop to g3, I lock in the bishop and pawn pair here, and he goes queen e2 check now. The best move for him was to play h5, double attacking the knight. And if I played this, then just here. Wait. If I played c6, then he would take, and then rook e5 check. And I'm just like, this is really, really bad for me. Oh boy. Yeah, so queen e2, but queen e2, I'm able to bring my knight back. And now it's like almost even because I have this pretty strong pair. And I'm guarding my king sufficiently at this moment. He goes queen to e4, and I'm just completely back in the game because what does queen e4 do? I mean, it targets this pawn, right? But like I can just defend it with knight to c6. Bishop takes f4, bishop takes, queen takes. We get an exchange. He wins his pawn back. I was fine with this. But here I make an extremely horrible, horrible move. So in this position, I noticed that his king and queen are lined up. And I'm like, well, if I castled, my rook would be here, and that would be a possibility in the future. So why don't I just castle? Audience moment number 2. Find one of the ways, or it's really just one idea, but find the way that white can force checkmate in a few moves. And the hint I'm going to give you is, how can white create a battery to attack the king? And if you found it, the move is queen h6, right? Or you could go here, or you could go here. The idea is to create a battery on the h file and attack the h7 pawn, which would be checkmate. And the king cannot do all that much to defend against it. Like the main line continuation here is queen takes d3, bishop takes d3, rook fe8, creating some space. Queen takes here, queen h6, and queen h8 mate. So there's basically no way for me to escape that. And yeah, after queen h6, I resigned because I saw that there was no way out. And I got logged out because I tried to do this earlier when I was super sick, and I couldn't do it. I don't know. Da Rules wants to be friends. What is happening in this video, guys? I'm I'm getting so many like weird notifications and stuff. I have to scroll through a bunch of games here. Okay, so here's the second game. This is the second game I played against Chuck. This time I was on the white pieces, and this one went a little bit better. As you can see from the review, we're both in the 70s with accuracy. E4, E5, knight C3. Excuse me. And I'm hoping desperately in this position that he would play the move knight to C6. Because I have a very tricky line against this. I prepared the move. This is my favorite line in all of chess, by the way. My very favorite opening line is queen to g4 in this position, which just looks absolutely idiotic. But the idea is to target this pawn. And if you play knight f6, you're just going to lose your rook. So black will often play queen to f6 here. And then here it comes. Knight d5, attacking the queen, and you're like, whoa, you just hung f2 with a check? You just slide over to d1. If your opponent tries to checkmate you on f1, you just take with the bishop. And the best move for black in this position is very hard to find, because it is king to f8. That is the best move in this position. King to f8, guarding the g7 pawn. But even after king to f8, the main idea of this can still be executed, which is knight to h3, attacking the queen. So let's just look at the squares where it can go. Not here, not here, not here, not here. It can't go here. It can't go here, 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 or here, or here. It can only go to this square. So you go there. But that is an awful mistake, because then white plays d3 and completely traps the queen in jail, and you are preparing to play c3 on the next move and just win his queen. He has to find a very accurate way to defend against this, which includes knight f6 attacking black's queen, or you could go d6 as well. But white is much better because this queen is just completely stuck. Like I really like going down those lines, because people often think they've got me with like their queen f2 check and stuff. But oh man, it's so fun. But yeah, he played knight f6, and I just was like, I can never get anybody to play knight c6 against me. So I just play d3, c6. You know, he's trying to play d5. We're trying to break in the center. Knight f3. I counter target this pawn so that if this and I take and move back, that he still has to deal with this before he castles, right? d5, takes, bishop check. I try to get a tempo here with the idea of taking after this. So he plays bishop d7, and I threw out the move knight takes c5 in this position in the game due to the following continuation. I calculated the following continuation over the board. I said, this is bad because takes queen a5, knight c3, and d4, and I'm just losing my knight. And this is as far as my calculation went, but I forgot that I had the move knight to c4. I forgot I had the move knight to c4 attacking his queen, and if he tries to keep the pin with a move like that, then a3 attacks his queen, and it's just trapped. I calculated all the way to d4, and I forgot about knight c4. But that was an audience moment, unfortunately. Uh, but I forgot. Uh, yeah. So I calculated that whole line, but I just I forgot about knight c4. So then I take on d7 because I'm like, well, if he takes with the queen, then this happens. But of course, he's going to take with the knight, and I just kind of accepted that that was the necessary continuation. Castles. Computer wanted me to just like kind of try to open up the center here. Maybe get like takes, and then try to contest the e file. Castles, castles, bishop g5. I'm just putting some pressure onto that knight. Then he plays this, which was and it didn't strike me as a good move because he just completely gave up the e4 square for my knight to go and pressure that pin even more. He brings his bishop back, and then knight takes f6. And I'll make this an audience moment. Which way should black recapture? With the knight, bishop, or pawn? And if you manage to figure it out, the best move is definitely bishop takes. Because you guard this pawn with knight and bishop. And I can't take. But if you take with the knight, like you did like Chuck did in the game, knight takes c5 is just free, right? And he realized that like after I played it, he was like, yeah, I should have taken with the bishop. But the computer didn't even want me to take on e5. It wanted me to play rook e1, just adding more pressure and like preparing to stack on this file. Then it would have gone like h6, bishop h4, bishop d6, defending the pawn, knight e5, bishop e5, rook e5. And white is just better up a pawn, right? Knight e5, queen c7, just attacking my knight. And I didn't want to go bishop to f4 because then he could play bishop to d6 and double attack my knight. And if I played rook to e1, he could bring another rook. Like he just has way too many attackers to put on that knight, and it can't move because my bishop would hang. So I just bring the knight back to f3 and target the pawn on d4. He plays rook a d8 defending it. I go queen to d2, linking up bishop and queen and connecting my rooks on the back rank. h6, and I go here. Secondary purpose of this move was to, yeah, like I said, link up bishop and queen, allowing me to attack the queen. Bishop d6 gets in the way, and I take. I like the fact that his bishop is off the board, and it's just knights and heavy pieces, because this isolated pawn is going to be a huge weakness for black in any endgame. Like I have a majority on the queen side with an isolated d pawn. This is just going to be a winning endgame for white, like 9 out of 10 times. That's what I kind of had on my mind here. Rook fe1, and he goes g5. He's trying to lash out at my knight, but he's creating very noticeable weaknesses on his king side. And I calculated. I was trying to calculate the move h4, but after the move g4 95 and something like rook here, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to play. Like I can't take here, and I can't really like advance or anything. But the computer wanted me to go here, hit this, and maybe initiate trades along the e file. And like I said, any endgame that we simplify into, like the more pieces we trade off, this pawn is just going to exist as a permanent liability for black. But I play queen a5. And you will see my strategy in this game in a few moves, right? And by the way, the sacrifice here, like you might be thinking to sacrifice the knight for 2 pawns to get like this scary check on the king. But after king to h8, The knight guards these two squares. The king has plenty of breathing room, and the rook is just going to come here and challenge the queen. Like, there's no way for white to attack the king here because it's only the queen attacking. Like, white doesn't have enough time to get any other pieces in the game because they can't go here or here with the rook. Um, so yeah, queen a5, a6. He defends against that threat, and then I play rook to e5. You see, I'm kind of trying to slice the board in half here, just cut off his pieces, and then I'm gonna double up the rooks and try and like just literally slice the board like a pizza into four pieces. This is kind of what I'm doing. G4 attacks my knight. I really like to see that move because now I'm able to maneuver and put my knight on the super powerful f5 square, which hits the queen and hits the pawn. Rook f to e8, and I just double up. And he's basically frozen. Like, what move do you make here for black? Like, the only move that you can make is like realistically to trade the rooks. But now what do you do? It's really hard to play this position as black because, like I said, this pawn, your king is weak, and it's just terrible. Knight d5 attempts to get in the way. Knight d5 attempts to get in the way. And I play rook to h5. I play rook to h5, and this is where my troubles kind of start manifesting. Rook to e8. You see the problem? Do you see that? Do you see what you smelling what I'm stepping in? Like that, my back rank is insanely weak, and if my queen were to ever move off from protecting that e1 square, I would be mated. So g3 is a saving move because it gives my king this square. I obviously can't play this, right? Like if I played this, he's like h3. He's gonna play g3, and if I take, then my structure is ruined. He's gonna take on g3 and still threaten that same thing. So g3, knight b4, and I make a terrible, terrible blunder. Yep. Audience moment. What's black's move in this position? And I'll give you a hint. I literally talked about it just a few moves earlier. And if you were able to get it, which you probably were, rook to e1 check. Which I can play king to d2. I calculated this and I thought it was fine because I'm like, oh, well, I'm hiding my king. But then he goes b5. He hits my queen. And if I back up to b3, then he goes queen to c6, lasering me on that diagonal. I can't block because he just takes. But I'm like, well, yeah, my knight protects that. I can block. You can't take. G takes f3. Knight takes. How does black continue the attack here, folks? There's only one move. You can have another audience moment. How does black continue the attack here? What is the only check that black can give that actually does something? And if you were able to figure it out, the move is rook to e2, and white can resign. The only move that isn't immediately made is king to h3, and then you just lose your knight, and then the queen and rook are going to come down here and just go like this, and you lose. You just lose. But he plays queen to f8 because he got scared. He thought that I was defending against this perfectly, that I was defending both against the back rank threat and his knight taking these pawns, and that this was still weak, so he needed to defend that. So I play knight f5, again hanging rook e1, but he plays king h7, and I just take on h6, and he resigns. Man, talk about games that I did not deserve to win. That was a prime example. That was an absolute prime example, and now we move on to opponent number 2. Juan, who I learned the name from last week. He was the guy who was like slamming pieces down and kind of messing up my brain a little bit. And yeah, it kind of happened in this game too. I mean, you have to keep in mind here that like I was in the incubation period for a very nasty virus, so that could be affecting my play as well. but yeah, it was just wasn't a good combination of factors for me. E4 C6. I play my Caro-Kann. I come to my senses, right? Knight C3. This is like an interesting approach. Where you basically like maybe you go for like a two knights or some kind of d4 position. But knight c3 is an interesting approach because in the Caro-Kann your c pawn normally wants to move up, and you're just immediately taking that away on move two. Like that's why it's not great. But yeah, d3. This is the computer supported approach to the Caro-Kann. Essentially, like takes right, takes and knight c to e2. This is wait, did I read that wrong? Okay, yeah. Takes, and then here and here. This is how the computer combats the Caro-Kann. Just gets an early queen trade, doesn't move the king, has a powerful pawn in the center of the board, knight f6, it can push. This square is taken away, and white just has a marginally better position because it's a little bit easier to play. This is how the computer fights against the Caro-Kann. So he's basically playing like a computer at this point. E6. I play e6 because I don't want to go down that line. And by the way, you may be like, well, you don't have to trade the queens. But after I take here, there's really no other good moves because if I go like queen to b6, that's just kind of a waste of time and he can just develop a piece. Yeah, so knight f3. Yeah, computer was suggesting here for him d4, just taking the chance to occupy the center. And if I were to take here, then he would take and it would turn into something like a Tartakower with my queen developed here instead of my knight. And once again, white has a better position because I am underdeveloped, hindering my own development, and he has an easier position. Right. We're getting into kind of the weeds of the Caro-Kann here, but it's just I kind of want to do that because he played what the computer plays against the Caro-Kann, so it's like a kind of an appropriate way to talk about it. Bishop d6. I just passively developed the bishop. This is normally appropriate. G3. Now, this is a unique approach. I see very few people fianchetto their bishop against the Caro-Kann because, like, the reason you fianchetto the bishop is to pressure this diagonal. But if you haven't done anything to break up this structure, why on earth would you do that, right? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. D takes c4, I now take because I'm not allowing a queen trade down this file anymore. Knight takes c4, bishop c7, I back up out of the way. I'm just like, oh, look at your knight all big and powerful in the middle of the board. Huh, I'm so scared. I'm just going to play here and challenge it and get my queen out and pressure this long diagonal. What you going to do about it? Bishop g2, knight d7. I'm kind of slow playing this a little bit because I'm playing it in like a kind of a Karpov variation style where I'm going to play knight g to f6 and then take back with my knight because the queen here doesn't really do a whole lot because the bishop is controlling that and he can just play something like c4, c3, and queen c2, and I never have any threats along that diagonal. Castles, knight g to f6. I'm executing my idea, going to trade and take with the knight and then castle. Bishop to g5. He prevents me from taking the knight by pinning. h6. I'm asking that bishop what it wants to do, like, hey, put up or shut up. Bishop d2. It goes all the way back. So I also don't know why the computer is suggesting this because it looks like your bishop's going to get trapped, but apparently knight takes, and bishop takes g5 is better for white. Computer things. Castles. I have no idea why I didn't take this. I you know the still the beginner mindset is still present in me where I'm just like, got a castle before I do anything in the center of the board. Got a castle. I castle, and then I take, and then I take. Right, bishop takes, and this is an audience moment. This is a more positional moment. Why is it? Excuse me. Why is it inaccurate to take with your bishop in this position? And I'll give you a hint. How can black improve the positioning of one of their pieces while targeting that bishop? And if you are able to figure it out, the answer is knight to f6. This was basically my idea from the start, and now he brought his most powerful piece, like his most important piece in his entire position, out and let me target it with the knight. So he has to back it all the way up to g2. And then I play bishop to d6 because I want to reroute this bishop to e7 so that I can hop my knight in the center and double attack this knight on h4, because I kind of view this knight as as a little bit misplaced. So I wanted to sort of punish its positioning. But the computer wanted me to go e5. Just like, hey, take the center, dummy. Like, don't worry about this bishop reroute. It'll come in time. Take the center. Bishop d6, queen c1. Uh, he's setting up he's setting up some ridiculous sacrifice over here, which I don't think really works at all, because like I said, this knight on f6 is a very important defensive piece for a castle to king position. But I go king h7 just in case, right? Because you never know with Juan. Like, he's kind of like the Mikhail Tal of intermediate chess, and if you don't know who that is, then he was a guy who sacrificed a bunch of pieces and like nobody knew what the hell he was doing, but he still won a lot of games. Juan's kind of like that. I never know what he's going to do, so I'm just like, just in case he sacrifices the bishop, I'm going to go king h7. F4. He's now just like trying to lash out as hard as possible against my pawns. Bishop to e7, I complete that bishop reroute. He goes knight f3, he kind of just gets out of the way. Queen b6 check. I give a check and I activate my queen out here, but I think this is a bit inaccurate because I'm putting my queen on the wrong side of the board, basically. Like, my pieces should be like over here. There's not really any weaknesses over here for me to exploit yet, so I shouldn't be trying to pressure it just yet. But he goes d4. Which is not a good move because that pawn is now a target for me to play c5 and latch onto. And if he takes, then I can take and set up a cannon along that diagonal, right? Knight e4 instead. Knight e4, I'm trying to grab the bishop pair and eliminate the defender of the dark squares. But he goes knight e5, which just didn't make any sense to me at all. He's undefending this pawn. And what is he going for? This is defended, this is defended, this is defended. Oh my god, can I draw arrows? This is defended, this isn't defended, but what the hell would you even be doing on that square? Like, I don't know what. He just wanted to put his knight in the center, I think. He just wanted to look scary. Queen takes d4. I completely missed in this position that he could just play bishop to e3. Like, if I just, did what I was going to do with this move anyway and just took the bishop, I would have been better. But I hurried it up. I was like, I'm going to throw in a take first because then I'm double attacking this. King h1. And I take. And here's an interesting audience moment. Why is the move queen takes bishop incorrect? And if you were able to figure it out, the answer is because bishop takes knight is a check. And now that queen is going to fall because the knight is no longer protecting it. And in the game, I played that, and then while my hand was on the piece, I realized it was a bad move, and he let me take it back, and I played this. But I kind of saw rook d1 coming, and he was going to win back my knight. So I played queen to b4, just kind of sliding out of the way. Maybe after this, there's this. Rook takes d2, f6. I kick the knight back. He goes knight d3, attacking my queen. I back up to b6. Right? Queen d1, just doubling up on the file. Rook d8, when you see queen, line up on queen. Bishop to e4. I have no idea in this position why I didn't just play f5. I was like, maybe my e6 pawn might be weak. I honestly don't know. Queen h5, and now I play f5 because I'm like, oh boy, he's gonna play g6 and queen h7 and mate me. But yeah, how can white get another piece into the attack? Like, audience moment, how can white get another piece into the attack? And if you figured it out, the answer is knight e5. And yes, this does sacrifice a full rook, but the queen is going to invade, and you're just going to perpetually check. And if black makes a misstep, there's going to be like some knight f7 check, and there's going to be a mate at some point, right? But he goes rook e1, f takes, rook takes, c5. I have no idea why I played c5. I think the idea might have been to go queen c6 and pin that rook. But he plays f5. He's trying to lash out at the e6 pawn. Queen c6 pins the rook, right? And best move for me in this position was to play. Wait. Mm, yeah, rookie. Wait, what? So c4, rookie 2. Uh, yeah, so I. Oh, so yeah, this was a demonstration of why I shouldn't have played c4. Got it. Yeah, so if I play c4, then he plays knight e5, which this time is a brilliant move, sacrificing the rook, and then knight f7, king g8, and mate in 9 happens after knight takes h6, g takes h6, queen e8, king g7, queen takes bishop check, king h8, queen f6, king h7, queen g6, king h8, queen takes h6, king g8, rook g4, king f7, rook g7, king f8, queen h8. Can't believe he didn't see that. That's really honestly a rookie mistake. Queen to c6, right? All right. But yeah, I didn't play c4, so he might have seen that if I did play c4. So he goes rook e2, c, and now I play c4, and he jumps the knight in, and I give a check. And yeah, by the way, like he did sacrifice a full bishop back here, so he needs to kind of attack super hard, or else I'm just going to be completely winning. Like he did sacrifice a full bishop. Just to point that out, because I don't think I made that clear later. I get earlier. I give a check, and then I play queen to d5, which I saw in the game allowed knight g6, and knight takes c7, right? But he played the wrong knight check. He played the wrong knight check, and now I'm completely winning after king to g8. I'm winning after king to g8. Knight h6 takes queen g6, king f8, because I run to the other side of the board. And in this position, he picked up the rook and slammed it down on the pawn and said check. And I was like, you're pinned. So he played king h3 to get out of the pin. And then I checked him, g4. And I missed mate in 1 in this position, folks. I'm ashamed to say I literally missed mate in 1. So find the mate in 1. And if you found it, like I didn't, the answer is queen f3. I think I thought that he had king h4, but the bishop just guards that. But yeah, anyways, I give that check, king g3, check with the bishop, bishop e7, and then I play b5, protecting this pawn. Queen e5 check, king b6, instead of blocking with the bishop and pinning for some weird reason. Like whenever I play against Tuan, my brain just turns into mush. I have no idea what happens. Like I literally didn't see the most basic of pins. a4, a6, defending the pawn, again not pinning the queen. Rook f2, and now I pin the queen. In this position, I pin the queen when he can sacrifice it with check and then take my queen, and he just wins his piece back. I do it at exactly the wrong moment, but he obliges me, does the trade, and I just win in another exchange. And at this point, it's just kind of a done deal. Like I play bishop d7, I stop his pawn. He promotes to a bit like this is the weirdest ending to a chess game I've played in a very long time. He he promoted to a bishop. I took and then he resigned. He was just like, I'm gonna make a bishop, and then I took and he was like, oh yeah, it's over. Like what? Oh, okay. Whew, that one was interesting. And now let's move to this game, which was definitely the shortest game that I've played at that. I don't think we even barely need to turn the review on. Because I played at 93.9% accuracy, but it was such a short game, so it doesn't matter. E4, C5. He plays the Sicilian defense. The Sicilian defense Bucher variation. I'm not sure if that's how you say that, which is essentially like I'm going to play the Sicilian and then play a completely useless pawn move on the side of the board, which just allows my opponent to take full center space. E6, bishop to E3, threatening to take this pawn, and then he doesn't defend it. He just pushes another pawn. Takes, knight c6. This is kind of an idea similar to a variation of the Caro-Kann, where you sacrifice a pawn and play knight c6, but it's not at all similar because I have a much better structure and you have no easy way to win this pawn back. Knight b to d2. And this he already makes a fatal mistake in this position. He plays knight g to e7, allowing for the absolute dominant positional maneuver, knight c4. And that threatens knight d6 check, which would be mate in this position if he doesn't move his knight. So he has to move his knight or his queen to make space for his king, knight d6, and then knight f7, and he resigned after 9 moves. He said that he was tired, but oh my god, that was something else. And folks, we finally move on to the last game of this meetup against the one and only, he who everyone fears, James. I haven't played him for a few weeks, and I have prepared for this very day when it would happen. I prepared literally about 14 moves of preparation in an opening for this very encounter. I'm not lying to you. My preparation coming into this, I'm just going to go into my preparation and tell you what that was before we even get into the game, because that will kind of lead us into the game, because those are like the first few moves of the game. But my preparation going into this was because I usually play e4, right? But against e4, he likes to go here, take, and play this weird gambit knight f6, which tries to go after the pawn with the knight. And I just tend to get into like very uncomfortable positions where he just gets a lot of quick development, and I really have nothing to show for it. Like I don't really like these positions. And this is what happened in the last game that we played. So I played d4. And I know that he likes to go knight f6. This is the most principled uh, line against d4. And I was going to play c4. He was going to play e6. And then I played knight c3, which is a surprising move at high level because it invites what is known as the Nimzo Indian defense, which is which is known as the most testing and annoying d4 opening for black to play against white. And even the grandmasters don't allow it unless they have deep preparation, right? Because this pin is just extremely annoying. You can't play e4. Black's just going to castle and play d5, c5, and just overrun your center, right? So you have to be prepared if you invite the Nimzo Indian with white. But I was prepared. My preparation was to go queen c2, the main line. Then he would play d5 and break the center. I would exchange pawns. All this has happened in the game so far, by the way. This was all my prep, and it happened in the game. Then I would play bishop to g5. And I was betting on him to play c6 because this was the one kind of like gamble of the preparation. Like this was where I didn't know what he was going to play, but I thought he might play c6 because he wants to restrict my knight even further. He wants to guard his pawn on d5, and he wants to play knight b to d7 to support my pin, right? And then in this position, I would play a3, and my preparation went like he would take. I would take with the queen. He would castle. I would play e3, strengthening my pawns. He would play h6. I would take, knight f3, bishop f5, actively developing the bishop, bishop to e2, and then he would play knight to d7, maybe intending to pressure some of these squares over here. I would castle. This is literally the preparation that I had against him. And the reason I chose this line, by the way, is because the ways forward for black are kind of unclear. Like, the computer wants black to bring the queen around and pressure these pawns, and then replace that with the rooks, right? And it wants me to, like, you go on like a minority attack to try to create an isolated pawn on the queen side, right? Like, my plans are a little bit more clear, and he has to do like this obscure queen rotation, replace it with his rooks, and like try to create some kind of wedge against my advance on the queen side. But this is all for naught because he threw me out of my preparation on move 7 by playing bishop to e7. I just did not expect this move at all because the entire point of the Nimzo Indian is to take that knight on c3 because White's never going to do this, right? So I'm out of the book. What do I do now? I play e3. Just straight. I'm kind of applying the same principles as my prep. h6. I back up because now there's no real point in taking here. No point in giving up that bishop. Bishop e6, just developing that bishop. Knight f3, grabbing control of the center. Knight b to d7, just developing and supporting that knight. Bishop d3, creating a battery if he ever castles. Knight b6, like I said, maybe eyeing some of these light squares over here. Queen e2, I prevent any, or I don't really prevent because his bishop is here, but I keep an eye on any knight c4s in the future. Queen d7, which I thought was an inaccurate move, and I punished him for it, and this is an audience moment. Folks, how did I positionally punish this move? And the hint I will give you is, how do I attack a mispositioned piece? And if you found it, the move here is knight e5. Just hopping the knight forward into a powerful square and attacking the queen, forcing it to move. And white is now better. After queen to c8 and f4, creating this outpost here. Because in order for black to kick me out, he would either have to go back or move this knight and play f6, which would weaken his king side. Bishop to f5, and I go for the trade because now I can advance the pawn on the king side and attack his queen, right? It's like I didn't want to do this here because he could just take me. But bishop takes, and then I play g4, and I think I have like a big pawn storm over here. And now we enter a forced sequence of moves. Knight takes g4 is the best move. Because, if he, well, not there, obviously. Listen, if he backs up to like c8, right, then like I'm just gonna long castle and then bring both my rooks and attack him, right? So the most active way is knight takes g4, and then I'm forced to play bishop takes e7 because if I play this, he takes with check, right? Bishop takes e7, knight takes e5, because if he takes here, then I take here and I get a piece. So he takes, I take with the f pawn, opening up the f file. He takes with the king, and I play rook to f1, attacking the queen, and then he blockades my pawn. That was a forced sequence of moves. We both calculated that we played it pretty quickly, or at least as quickly as James goes. You know how he goes pretty slow sometimes. Rook c1, and here's where I start going off the rails because I'm like, I have this sneaky idea of like, well, knight b5, right? Knight b5, and if he takes, I invade here, and I just get the rooks on the set on that rank. But it's really not as good as it seems because I don't really have any firepower behind these rooks. I just, sacrificing a knight to get this invasion is kind of a cool idea, but it doesn't have a whole lot backing it up. f6, he's trying to challenge that pawn, very principled move by him. A4. I'm trying to lash out after that knight. I don't know why I allowed him to take on F5. I'm not quite sure about that, but he brings his rook. Now I attack his knight and he backs up. I don't have any knight B5 anymore, so now I take. Wait, I should have taken. But now I play queen G7 because I'm like, well, yeah, now I'm targeting this. But he can take in this position. He can take because if I go here, he goes king to E8, and my queen has no targets. Like he's just gonna attack me with like a billion different pieces. He's gonna open up my center and just absolutely run me over. Queen to G2, and he gets afraid of that, so he plays G5, and I take on F6. He takes, and I play this, which is a bad move. Audience moment. What intermezzo does black have here before they take back the rook? And an intermezzo is a move that you play in between a recapture. And if you were able to figure it out, the move here is queen takes e3 check. Throwing this check in and eliminating a pawn in front of the king before you recapture the rook. And queen e2 is pretty much forced here because you pin the queen to the king and force them off the board. Queen e2, and I think I take with the king because I don't want to. I don't want to like maybe pin my knight to my king in the future and keep my king on the back rank, kind of vulnerable. But anyway, yeah, queen e2, king e2, and then he takes back. King f3, we both try to get our kings involved. He lines up his rook. Q1, and now I'm just playing an endgame down 2 pawns against James. Like I kind of knew this had very little hope of succeeding while I was playing it, but I did it anyway. King to G3, H5, H4 takes, and now this is an absolute master tier move from James. What is the move that he can play here to restrict my king to the side of the board? And if you figured it out, the move is just a very simple rook to G8. And my king is stuck on the H file. His king is in the center of the board, and he is going to win with these pawns over here. That's it. My king can't get into the game ever. Like, it's just over. King H3, rook G4. He invades. He targets this, so I play knight to D2. Rook E4 pinning me, and I offer this exchange, which kind of complicates things a little bit because after takes, I go rook here, pick off this pawn, takes, and then after this, I give a check, and instead of taking here, which I can't do, I throw in the fancy move A6, because if he goes here, I take here, and if he goes here, I take here. So I think I'm kind of holding on in this position because, like, the more pawns fall off the board, the less chances there are of him queening, right? I mean, that's what you would think. King f5, rook takes a6. I'm like, yay, I'm getting my pawns back. I might actually have a chance here. Rook b3, king g2. But his rook is just like the problem here, right? The problem boils down to this. His rook is too damn active. Like I just it's just controlling my king way too much. His king is also too active. Like his pieces are so much better positioned. I mean, while he might be only up 1 pawn, my pieces are terribly spread apart and misplaced and are not helping each other at all. And his pieces are pretty much perfectly arranged to accomplish the goal of picking off this pawn and promoting one of these. It's all about activity in endgames. The material count matters very little in positions like this. It's all about how active your pieces are. King e4, rook a4, I defend the pawn, king d3. This is such a good move. Like, I'll make sure that there are no checks, and the next move is going to be rook to c4, forcing the trade of rooks, and if I check, he's just going to block with the rook and take on the next move, and I resign. I mean, I gave it my best shot. It was a very high-level game. We both played it over 85% accuracy, but oh my god, like, guess better luck next time. Nose back to the grindstone to figure something else out. But I've been the Amazing Haley, and I'll see you in the next video.